What happens when Hollywood's most famous, strong actor walks into a place full of daytime television hosts who think they can boss him around? Well, you're about to find out, and believe me, this is one fight you won't see coming. Clint Eastwood, the man who built a career by gazing fiercely at villains and speaking the truth softly, found himself facing Joy Behar in what began as a simple promotional visit but quickly turned into television chaos. Before we get into this intense moment, make sure you hit that follow button and leave a comment below because this tale is going to leave you stunned. The cameras rolled Liv and Whoopi Goldberg smiled warmly at their guest. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the iconic Clint Eastwood," she announced as the studio audience burst into applause. Eastwood nodded politely as he sat down, his aged hands resting calmly on the armrests. "Thank you for inviting me," he said in that deep, distinct voice. "So Clint, tell us about your newest work," Whoopi went on, keeping things easy and proper. "What drew you to this specific story?" "Well, it's about second chances," Eastwood replied after a moment of thought. "Sometimes people deserve another opportunity for forgiveness, even when everyone else has dismissed them." Sarah Haynes leaned forward with real curiosity. "That's such a wonderful idea. How do you pick which stories to share at this point in your amazing career?" "I look for what's real," Eastwood answered simply. "Stories that say something honest about the human experience. Hollywood has plenty of make-believe." The chat flowed easily for several minutes, with Eastwood sharing thoughts about how he directs and works with actors. The studio audience was clearly charmed by his presence and smart insights. But Joy Behar had been unusually quiet, sitting back in her chair with a knowing little grin. She had been waiting for her moment, and now she saw it. "May I ask you something?" Joy cut in, her voice changing a lot. "You talk about truth and forgiveness. But don't you think some of your older remarks about certain political figures might clash with that message?" The air felt much colder in the studio. Whoopi shot Joy a warning look, but it was already too late. Eastwood's eyes got slightly narrower as he turned to face Joy directly. "Which remarks would those be, Joy?" "Oh, Joy said with false kindness. "Your support for politicians who will remain unnamed, but who have said some very questionable things about women and minorities." "I don't recall making any statements that were rude about women or minorities," Eastwood replied calmly, his voice having that familiar metallic edge that movie watchers knew well. "But because of who you support," Joy pushed on, clearly having fun. "Don't you think your political backing sends a certain message?" The other hosts exchanged worried glances. This wasn't the way anyone had planned for the interview to go. Eastwood leaned back in his chair and fixed Joy with a stare that could have turned water to ice. "Young lady, I've been in this industry since before you were born. I've worked with people of every background, every political opinion, and I judge them by their character, not their party membership." "Young lady," Joy's voice went up a level. "Excuse me, but I think I have every right to ask hard questions of my guests. And I have every right not to answer trick questions from someone who's more interested in causing trouble than having a proper talk." Eastwood shot back, his calm manner never wavering despite the sharpness in his voice. Joy's face turned bright red. "Trick questions? I'm asking about your public statements, Clint. That's what we call reporting." "Is that what we're calling it now?" Eastwood replied with a small laugh that somehow made the insult even worse. "In my time, reporting meant looking up information and facts, not just going on fishing trips." Whoopi tried to step in. "Let's maybe go back to discussing your movie, Clint." But Joy wasn't going to back down. "No, I think this is important. You can't just come on television and expect easy questions when you've made controversial political statements such as..." Eastwood's voice remained steady, but his eyes had that dangerous sparkle that anyone who had seen his films would recognize. "Well, there was that whole empty chair thing," Joy said smugly, talking about a political event he was at years ago. "You mean when I used a clever way of speaking to make a point about political responsibility?" Eastwood replied. "Yeah, I remember that. What about it? Don't you think it was a little, I don't know, crazy?" Joy pushed, clearly thinking she had found her winning point. The studio audience was completely quiet now. Even the crew had stopped moving, realizing that something big was happening. Eastwood leaned forward a little, his voice dropping to that very quiet tone that was somehow more frightening than shouting. "Joy, let me ask you something. How many films have you made?" "What does that have to do with anything?" Joy shot back defensively. "Just answer the question. How many films have you directed, produced, or been the main star in? That's not the point. I'm a television host and a comedian, right? And how many Academy Awards have you won?" Joy's voice was getting higher. "Again, that's not important to this conversation. How about this then?" Eastwood continued, his tone becoming more serious. "How many careers have you started? How many young actors have you given their first chance to? How many stories have you told that actually meant something to people?" "I entertain people every day on this program," Joy replied. But her confidence was clearly shaky. "Do you?" Eastwood asked with true curiosity. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you attack guests and try to cause trouble for better ratings. Is that your idea of having fun?" Sarah Haynes interrupted, trying to make the mood lighter. "Clint, your films have entertained millions of people all over the world. What's been the most satisfying part of your career?" But Eastwood wasn't ready to let Joy off the hook yet. "You know what, Sarah? I'll answer that. The most satisfying part has been working with people who know what they are doing. People who understand that respect must be earned, Not just asked for, people who don't hide behind a group of co-hosts to make cheap digs at their guests. Joy's mouth fell open. Cheap digs? I'm asking honest questions about your political views. No, Eastwood corrected her. You're trying to create a moment that goes viral for your social media clips. There's a difference between asking about someone's opinions and trying to trap them. I'm not trapping anyone, Joy argued. I'm doing my job. Your job is to interview guests about why they are here, Eastwood replied calmly. I came here to talk about a film I'm proud of, a story about forgiveness and second chances. You want to talk about politics and create drama? Whoopi made another effort to get the conversation back on track. The film does sound very interesting, Clint. Can you tell us about the main person in the story? It's about a man who's made mistakes, Eastwood said, his eyes still fixed on Joy. But who's trying to improve? Sometimes the biggest problems aren't the ones in front of you, but the people who want to keep you judged by your past instead of letting you grow. The deeper meaning wasn't lost on anyone in the studio, especially Joy, who was clearly getting more upset by the minute. That's a lovely message, Sarah said, clearly trying to keep things calm. Forgiveness is such a strong idea in storytelling, but Joy wasn't about to let the moment pass. Speaking of forgiveness, don't you think some people are beyond it? I mean, when someone keeps supporting politics that divide people, at what point do we stop giving them chances? Eastwood's jaw tensed up just a little. Are we talking about the character in my film, or are you trying to make this personal again? I'm talking about responsibility, Joy replied with false righteousness. Public figures have a duty to their fans. Do they now? Eastwood's voice had that dangerous quiet that anyone familiar with his movies would recognize. And what duty do television hosts have to their guests, to ask the hard questions that matter? Joy shot back immediately. No, Eastwood said firmly. To treat people with basic human respect, something you seem to have forgotten. The other hosts exchanged anxious glances. Whoopi was frantically trying to signal the producers, but Joy was too busy in what she thought was her moment of victory. Joy laughed harshly. That's rich coming from someone who spent decades playing violent roles and making gun use seem acceptable. The studio audience gasped audibly. Even by this show's standards, this was going too far. Eastwood sat back in his chair and looked carefully at Joy for a long moment, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. You know what your problem is, Joy? Tell me, she replied in a mocking way. You think being loud makes you correct. You think being aggressive makes you brave, but all it really makes you is a bully hiding behind a microphone. Excuse me. Joy's voice reached a pitch that made everyone in the studio flinch. You heard me, Eastwood continued, his voice remaining steady and calm. You sit here day after day taking shots at people who can't effectively fight back because they're guests on your program. You think that makes you powerful, but it just makes you small. How dare you call me small? Joy stood up from her chair, her face bright red with fury. I've been doing this job for years. I've interviewed presidents, celebrities, world leaders. And how many of them left here feeling like they'd been treated with courtesy? Eastwood asked pointedly. How many walked away thinking that was a professional chat? Joy was stuttering now. I don't have to take this from you or anyone else. You're absolutely right. Eastwood agreed calmly. You don't have to take anything from me, just like I don't have to sit here and let you turn what should have been a discussion about art into your personal political show. Whoopi finally found her voice. Clint, Joy, maybe we should all take a moment to breathe here. No, Whoopi, Eastwood said, standing up slowly. I think Joy and I understand each other completely now. Joy was practically shaking with anger. You can't just walk out of an interview because you don't like the questions. Watch me, Eastwood replied with that famous narrowed eye look. I came here as a favor to talk about something I care about. I didn't come here to be your punching bag for the day. This is live television, Joy protested. You can't just leave. Can I? Eastwood asked, already reaching for his microphone. See, that's another thing you don't understand, Joy. Real power isn't about trapping someone on live TV. Real power is knowing when to walk away. If you leave now, you'll look like you can't handle hard questions, Joy said desperately, sensing her moment disappearing. Eastwood paused and looked directly into the main camera. Folks watching at home, I came here to discuss a film that means something to me. Instead, I got ambushed by someone more interested in viral video clips than a real conversation. That tells you everything you need to know about the state of television today. Then he turned back to Joy. A's for handling hard questions, lady. I've been handling hard questions since before you knew what a microphone was. The difference is they were usually asked by professionals. Joy's face was now purple with rage. You arrogant person whose time has passed. You think you can just insult me on my own program? The words stayed in the air like a slap. The studio audience was totally silent. The other hosts looked ashamed, and even the crew members were staring in shock. Eastwood slowly turned back to face Joy. And for a moment, his face looked exactly like the characters he'd played in dozens of westerns, calm and dangerous, and absolutely finished with the situation. Has been, he repeated quietly. That's interesting coming from someone whose biggest accomplishment is sitting at a table talking about other people's achievements. The silence that followed was so loud you could feel it. You could hear a pin drop in the studio as everyone took in what Joy had just said. Eastwood's expression didn't change, but somehow the air around him seemed to sparkle with energy. Has been, he repeated slowly as if tasting the words. You know, Joy, in all my years in this business I've been called a lot of things, but usually by people who had achieved something important themselves. The Joy realized she had gone too far, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. I've accomplished plenty. Thank you very much. Have you? Eastwood asked, his voice dropping to that whisper that was somehow more frightening than yelling. Let's see. You've managed to insult how many guests over the years, created how many fights, ruined how many interviews that could have been meaningful talks. I asked the questions that need to be asked. Joy replied, but her voice was shaking now. No, Eastwood corrected her. You ask the questions that get you noticed. There's a difference between journalism and performance art, and you seem to have forgotten which one you're supposed to be doing. Whoopi made one final desperate attempt to fix the situation. Clint, maybe we can start over. Joy, why don't you say sorry and we can get back to discussing the film? Joy turned fiercely on Whoopi. Say sorry for what? For doing my job. Your job? Eastwood cut in. As supposed to be keeping your audience interested and informed, not attacking your guests just for fun. I wasn't attacking you, Joy argued weakly. Eastwood laughed, and it was not a happy sound. Lady, I've been in actual fighting. I know what an attack looks like. The difference is when someone attacked me in the service, at least they had the guts to do it to my face instead of hiding behind a television show setup. The other hosts were now openly staring at Joy with looks ranging from awkwardness to disgust. Sarah looked like she wanted to hide under the table. Even the studio audience was moving uncomfortably in their seats. You think you're so tough, Joy said, her voice breaking slightly. Well, let me tell you something, Mr. Eastwood. This is my house, these are my rules. And if you don't like my questions, you can leave. Eastwood smiled. And it was the coldest smile anyone in that studio had ever seen. Your house, your rules. You know what, Joy? You're absolutely right. This is your house, and that's exactly the problem. He stood up fully now, looking very tall over the seated panel. In your house, guests get trapped. In your house, disagreement means being rude. In your house, causing drama is more important than creating understanding. Well, congratulations. You've built yourself quite a house there. Joy was practically spewing words. If you think you can just waltz in here and give me lessons about television, you've got another thing coming. I'm not giving you lessons about television, Eastwood replied calmly. I'm pointing out that what you do isn't television, it's a circus, and you're the head clown. The gasp from the audience was loud, even by daytime television standards. This was unheard of. How dare you? Joy shrieked, completely losing any sense of acting professionally. How dare you come on my show and insult me like this? Your show? Eastwood looked around at the other hosts. Funny, I thought this was supposed to be a panel program with several hosts. Turns out it's just the Joy Behar ego hour with some backup singers. Whoopi finally stood up for herself. Clint, that's enough. Joy, you need to calm down right now. But Joy was beyond listening to reason. Don't tell me to calm down, Whoopi. This man comes in here with his I'm better than you attitude and thinks he can disrespect me on national television. The only person who's shown disrespect here, Eastwood said quietly, is you. From the moment I sat down, you've been looking for a fight instead of having a conversation. I was doing my job, Joy repeated. But the words sounded empty now. No, Eastwood shook his head slowly. Your job would be asking me about my work, my method, maybe even my thoughts on things related to filmmaking. Your job would be making your audience feel like they learned something or were entertained by something worthwhile. He pointed toward the cameras. Instead, you've spent the last 20 minutes trying to make a guest look foolish who came here in good faith, and you've succeeded in making yourself and your program look foolish instead. The Joy looked around desperately for help, but found none. The other hosts were carefully avoiding her gaze. The audience was clearly on Eastwood's side, and even the crew members were shaking their heads. Fine, she said finally, her voice cracking. If you don't want to answer real questions, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Eastwood was already removing his microphone, but he paused at those words. Real questions. You want to know what a real question sounds like, Joy? He looked directly into the main camera again. A real question would be, what keeps you making films at your age? A real question would be, what advice would you give to young filmmakers? A real question would be, what story are you most proud of sharing? Then he turned back to Joy. But those questions need you to actually care about the answers, and we both know you don't. The studio was so quiet you could hear the camera operators breathing. Joy looked like she wanted to say something else, but for once in her career, she seemed to be unable to speak. You know what the saddest part of all this is? Eastwood continued, his voice almost soft now. You had a chance to have a real talk with someone who's lived through decades of American film history. Instead, you chose to play gotcha games like an amateur blogger looking for clicks. He finished removing his microphone and set it carefully on the table. That's not just a waste of your time and mine, it's a waste of your audience's time. They deserve better than this performance you've been putting on. The Joy finally found her voice again, but it came out as a high-pitched shout. Don't you dare tell me what my audience deserves. I've been connecting with viewers for decades. Have you? Eastwood asked as he straightened his jacket. Or have you just been shouting at them for decades? Because there's a difference between getting through to people and just making noise. The producers were frantically signaling from behind the cameras, clearly trying to figure out how to deal with this unprecedented situation. This was live television, and their biggest guest was walking out after completely tearing down one of their hosts. "Security," Joy called out desperately. "Get security." Eastwood laughed sincerely for the first time since the interview began. "Security? What are they going to do, Joy? Arrest me for hurting your feelings?" He looked around the studio one more time, taking in the stunned faces of everyone present. "You know, I've been in this business for over 60 years. I've worked with the best directors, the finest actors, the most professional crews in the world, and in all that time, I've never met anyone quite like you." "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" Joy asked sarcastically, trying desperately to regain some command of the situation. "Take it however you want," Eastwood replied. "But just remember, when people talk about this interview tomorrow, they're not going to be talking about your hard questions or your honesty in reporting. They're going to be talking about how you completely lost your self-control and embarrassed yourself on live television." With that crushing final statement, Clint Eastwood walked calmly toward the studio exit, leaving behind a panel of shocked hosts, a stunned audience, and one completely humiliated Joy Behar, who was still trying to figure out how she had lost control so completely. As the studio doors closed behind him, the cameras captured Joy's face red with rage and embarrassment while the other hosts sat in speechless quiet, knowing they had just witnessed television history, but not the kind anyone would want to be remembered for. So, there you have it, folks. What started as a simple promotional chat turned into one of the most dramatic showdowns in daytime television history. Clint Eastwood proved that even in his 90s he's still the fastest draw in Hollywood. Except this time his weapon was words, not bullets. Make sure to subscribe for more amazing stories like this one. And let me know in the comments, do you think Joy Behar finally met someone who could truly challenge her?